Welcome to the Fieldhouse Strength Podcast. Fieldhouse Strength Podcast. If it's strength and conditioning, powerlifting, athlete performance, general fitness, and anything in between, we're talking about it. Your hosts are pros who've done it all and here to share that knowledge with you. This is the Fieldhouse Strength Podcast. And here are your hosts, Shaun Jones and Jonathan Byrd.
All right, welcome back to the Fieldhouse Strength Podcast. I am Shaun Jones, and with me as always, Jonathan Byrd.
The handsome Jonathan Byrd.
Yeah, the handsome and talented Jonathan Byrd. Okay, so this week we're going to do something a little bit different than what we've done. We've kind of discussed this topic a little bit. We're going to delve into a little bit more. Byrd, go ahead and let them know what we're looking at.
Well, you hear it a lot, and you get it from parents a lot too. Like, how young is too young to start training? And how do you train a youth? Let's talk about what we call a youth anyway. To me, I'm talking about middle school age and younger. But what is your call on that?
I'm pretty much there. Once 8th grade would be beyond what I would consider.
Yeah, youth. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so we're in the same ballpark of that. And to be honest with you, a lot of people do not know how to train a youth athlete. They have them doing the same things that you would have a high school age or older person doing, and or they're loading weights on a barbell for them at too young an age. And I just think there's a lot of things that could be discussed and that people can take away from this and do a better job of training their youth clients.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, is just knowing ahead of time going in. It's not a difficult process, but there are some parts of it that are different.
Yeah, it should look different. And truthfully, almost any individual client you're training, it should look different anyway.
Sure.
But and then even your group stuff to a degree, you can break those down even more. So there's a lot of things to discuss here and a lot of stuff to peel apart. But we're going to dive into it anyway.
Yeah, and the key to anything like this is going to be having enough knowledge to go in it comfortably. People get frustrated sometimes when they ask this question, is what's the best way to train athletes? And it's always a conditional statement. It depends. What are you training them for? Who are the kids?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of intangible pieces here that you have to know, but we're going to speak in generalities here. Mm-hmm. So what's some of the things that you make sure you do when training a youth athlete?
Well, the first thing is an assessment, because you can't take anything for granted. For one, there's such a difference between ages and the difference between development of the same age.
Absolutely.
You got one kid that may have already gone through puberty, which makes a huge difference, and a kid that's a little bit slower development. What I want to determine ahead of time is, can they hold a plank, get about push-ups? Most kids can't do them coming in that young, but I'll give them a shot at it. But I don't want to do it very much, because I don't want to dwell on something they can't accomplish. I want to see what their movement patterns are, how their flexibility is in their hips and ankles. And just for a point of reference, we may do some running and jumping so they can see where they've improved. But really, what I assess them on, the length of that assessment and the depth of it, determines what I see early.
Yeah.
So kind of what I look at, you're coaching a basketball player, and you don't know whether you want to have him be a point guard or not, but he can't dribble down the floor without bouncing off his foot. Don't worry about what he's going to play. Get him to where he can bounce the ball, and that's similar to that. If there's certain things they can't do early, I don't need to go any further.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, I agree, absolutely, you give them some sort of assessment. And one of the things I do is have a conversation with the adult involved, and what are your expectations?
Yeah.
Are these realistic expectations? Because if they're going to get me something that's just not realistic, it's probably not worth the time. The money is not worth the headache that may come with that. They think their kid's getting ready to go there and, speaking of youth athletes, but squat 135 pounds in 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. We're going to have to take some time before we get to barbell movements. And not everybody is aware of that. And your typical Planet Fitness trainer probably jumps right into those types of things. So it's a different world, and you've got to, I don't want to say cull the expectations, but make sure you're all on realistic expectations before you even put to work with that.
Yeah, I've got a funny story about that. Years ago, it was sort of a family member, and two daughters that were really talented in volleyball, and they both ended up playing collegiately. And he got a trainer. He was always excited to tell you about a deal he'd gotten. So he got a deal on a trainer. I said, be careful about getting those deals with trainers. You get what you pay for. He said, oh no, he's good, he's good. So he left, and I said, so what do y'all do with the trainer? They're like, I don't know. He just has us do leg extensions and goes off and talks to people.
Nice.
Yeah.
Quality coaching.
Yeah, I said, well, it makes sense. You would be kicking your legs straight out with force in the middle of a volleyball game.
Yeah, it's going to happen a lot.
Yeah, his thought was get their legs strong because they play volleyball. Didn't occur to him that there's a nervous system that has to fire certain things.
Yeah, and that you neglect the whole back half, and that's not going to do any good either. So, yeah, but that's a big part of it. Like one of the things I always do, and it's funny, you didn't put as much emphasis as I do on it, but I have them run. I have them run a little bit. I have them do some change of direction drills. I have them jump a little bit. That way I know, because unfortunately, a lot of these kids do not go play outside anymore. They don't do any of those things. They don't play tag. And so I need to know, have you ever ran in your life? The expectation of this parent is, little Timmy is, coming to Little League and he's been playing coach's pitch and been picking daisies in the outfield. I'm not getting ready to turn him into, the next Babe Ruth. So let's see what he can do and not do.
Yeah, I trained a kid. His family wanted him to play sports a lot more than he wanted to.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah, and his older brother was a pretty good athlete, and it just wasn't his thing. I worked with him for 3 or 4 months, and he just was not coordinated enough to run out of a building if it caught on fire. And I'm not joking either. He could not run. Sometimes kids are just limited. That's not their thing. It's an extreme example, but that's something you need to find out right away.
I spent a lot of time as a youth playing basketball. Not because I was a good basketball player, but because that's what everybody did when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And so it really helped me develop as an athlete at a younger age because I was playing all kinds of sports. And that's another soapbox that we get on at some point, but there's a reason why 15-year-old kids are having Tommy John surgery now. You need to let them play all the sports, all of it. I don't care if you don't like soccer, let the kid go play soccer. Let him see what he likes or she likes. Let them develop. It's only going to help them. Only going to help them.
And another thing that will help when you were talking about having a discussion with parents is even if you don't initially, you have to get to a point where you see strength and conditioning as a long-term effort.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It has to be progressive. It can't be, okay, we got 6 weeks of weightlifting season or running, and then we're going to go play whatever sport. So
that's been one of the things that, again, we're getting into a little older group of kids here, but that we've had to break here at the high school level is people thinking, well, it's game day. I'm not lifting weights on game day. I'm not asking you to max out in the squat, but we're going to lift. We're going to train. We're going to do certain things. It's going to be at a lower percentage and a lower effort, but we're going to get some things done. If not, you're losing a massive amount of your year of training.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about sports where you're playing multiple games a week, you can't take that amount of time off.
Correct.
Yep.
So another one for me, I normally start with some real basic fundamentals of movements. Can they do an air squat? How does that look? And I know that's part of your assessment stuff, but and I guess technically it's mine, but I I roll it out in phases.
Yeah.
And before we ever get to a barbell movement, it's air squats, it's a goblet squat, it's then, a lot of times I'll go to single leg variations, and then we'll start with like a PVC pipe. And until we can get those things down fundamentally correct, there is no point in putting them under a bar. And unfortunately, man, I see it way too much.
Yeah. The only time I use an external resistance is if it's easier than their body weight.
Yeah.
So if you can't do a push-up, we'll use light dumbbells.
Yeah, makes sense. You see it a lot with people who end up showing up that are going to your Planet Fitnesses and Gold's gyms, and they're over there lifting weights on the Smith machine. Now, I understand the Smith machine can be valuable depending on what you're doing, but not so much as an athlete, because they put you in a fixed plane, and that's really not beneficial. And they get this misleading idea that the bar weighs 45 pounds, which it does not.
No.
So.
Well, and really nobody knows because of the the pulleys are always different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're missing out. Your nervous system is leaving an entire group of muscles that are pivotal for those movements, leaving them completely out.
So a big part for me with training youth is all the stabilization stuff that has to come along with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're not able to sustain and stabilize your body weight doing movements in a light dumbbell, how do you plan on being able to, one, be an athlete on the field,
Mm-hmm.
or move a barbell, or any of those things? And people just rush into those things. It, like you said, it's a long-term thing. This thing is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And if you develop bad habits as a youth, one, you could run them away from it altogether.
Yeah.
And two, you'll be paying somebody to correct the issues down the line.
Right. And the first 6 weeks for me is a continued assessment like you were talking about. What I want to see in that initial assessment is, all right, what am I going to do that's going to keep them from getting hurt while we're working out? You know, where are we there? And then during those first several sessions, now I'm going to see what can be effective early. And the sad part is, essentially what we're doing now when we train a kid in the beginning is making up for them not playing outside.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start to get more specific from there. I mean, everything starts out generally, you know, as we've discussed before, and you don't start to specialize at all until those things are accomplished.
So as a younger, by younger I mean not as experienced trainer, I used to make fun of this, but not as much. I kind of see his point now. I still think it's silly, but I see why he did it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a name that a lot of people might recognize, but Jim Windler.
Mm-hmm.
So Windler's, developed 531. He was a power lifter, albeit I don't think a very good one. Whole other topic. But he is a strength coach at a high school in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things he does with those high school kids is teaches them how to do a cartwheel. Now, I think there's a lot more effective ways to go about it, but he's just teaching them how to have some body control
Mm-hmm.
in athleticism. Now, I think you could have done a million different ways. I mean, I think some sort of plyometric jumps and things would have solved that problem anyway.
How long does that take?
Yeah, but exactly.
Yeah.
And like you're turning a kid upside down on his hands, which I'm not a huge fan of either. But my point being, there's a lot of ways to accomplish it, and we're all going to look at this differently. And even some guys that are considered gurus have some crazy ideas.
Well, what ends up it comes down to is you can get way too complex for your own good.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Simplicity is the key. I know at one time when I first started learning some things, I was like, oh yeah, well, this has got to be tough. And then I finally said, no, that doesn't make any sense. Go back to what you know. Keep this in the back pocket. As a coach, no matter what you're coaching, you have to realize if a drill isn't working because the kids can't do it, get rid of it.
Yeah.
Not because they don't know how to do it, but they can't physically do it. And I have seen strength coaches give talks, and they are bound and determined to make these kids do it, and it's slowing down their talk and everything else. Jim Kilbasso is a really good strength coach, and he runs the International Youth Conditioning Association now. And we were at their summit, and I had a guy that was on my staff. He was a really good athlete, had been a defensive back in college, and he was the best athlete in the room. And they were running him through some drills, and he couldn't do the drill. And he goes, well, if he can't do it, let's go to the next thing. And,
Yeah, that's a problem.
yeah, he goes, obviously this drill's too hard because he can't do it. And that takes a little bit of humility, but it also shows you the trial and effort part of being a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. That coach falls back to what we're talking about with things really need to be individualized at that young of an age. I mean, you could do it as a group, but at some point you got to give them some direction individually to fix the issues. If you do it in groups of 10, you can do it pretty easily, but much after that, don't get sucked into that. Don't get sucked into my kid has a strength and conditioning class and it's got 25 kids in it. Well, your kid's 12. Like he really needs to learn some basics and some individualized eyes on him. Yeah. And maybe I'm saying that because I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not good enough to watch 30 kids at a time. Maybe somebody is, but I've never met them. So.
Right. Again, as a rule of thumb, the more specific the training, the smaller the group.
Yeah.
And the more general, the bigger the group. I mean, that's really with anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's kind of fall back into what it looks like.
Yeah.
You know, how you said we're rolling this thing out in phases. So you hit on something upper body wise, you know, if their body weight, let's say they're a heavier athlete, you know, they're a thrower or a, you know, bigger baseball kid or a football lineman type, and doing more than 2 or 3 push-ups is just nearly impossible for them.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with starting with a lighter dumbbell, starting with some banded movements, things of that nature to build that strength. It all comes down to, can you create flexibility, can you create athleticism, and can you create enough strength to keep developing the previous 2. If you can do those things, you can create speed, you can create explosiveness, but you have to be able to be strong enough and have enough supporting muscles to make those things work in the athletic setting.
Yeah, and a part of that too is to stop unwanted movement. So that's one thing I think that people make a mistake with. They want to train in the transverse plane, which is just twisting back and forth, for everybody that's not sure about that term. But what ends up they do all kinds of things where they're spinning and twisting. What I think is more valuable is anti-rotation. Mm-hmm. What's really going to strengthen those muscles in a way that's going to be useful is to do drills where you're fighting against rotation.
So it's interesting you bring that up. So I was developing some stuff for my summer plan for both my high school athletes, and then we're going to set up a day for our middle school athletes to come over and train. Mm-hmm. And some of that is starting and stopping drills that I picked up from the Florida Atlantic strength coach. I don't even know his name. I just steal his stuff off Instagram occasionally because he has some good change of direction stuff in it. Mm-hmm. But so, you know, I'm trying to lay out a plan for the summertime right now, and that's a huge part of it. Yeah. People, it's so neglected in the big picture of things. You must be able to control your body, both, you know, laterally, forward, and being able to stop and move backwards at times. And that's just something that people do not spend enough time developing. If you do not have change of direction type drills in your programming of youth, you're doing them an injustice.
Yeah, and for bigger kids, like you just mentioned, a kid that's, say, over 200 pounds in the 7th or 8th grade, he's going to be very large for his age, and it's going to be tough for them unless they're unusually progressed at that age. They're going to have a hard time holding their body weight up. Yeah. So I've had bigger kids like that. I've given them a heavy medicine ball and had them hold it out in front of them with arms straight and kind of eye level, and just have them stand in that position for 30, 45 seconds.
Maybe that's what my elementary school teacher was trying to do to help me out. She used to make me hold books out in front and to the side, mostly because I wouldn't shut up in class. But hey, maybe she was trying to help me be a better athlete.
Did you feel in your abs?
All I remember was it was miserable.
Just hating doing it. Yeah, she was doing that for her ears, I think.
Probably a good decision on her part.
Yeah. For some reason, my 4th grade teacher used a yardstick, but she hit me with it. Yeah.
Sometimes you got to put them in line.
Yeah. So the biggest thing with a big kid is if you could get him to where he can control his body weight, not necessarily to me, I consider like a low plank on your forearms more of an advanced stabilization exercise for that age. Most of them can't do it right away. So if he can do it standing, or if he can squat without movement in the middle, like then you're starting to get to a point where you can progress and not be concerned about poor form or injury. I'm not really concerned about him getting hurt doing what we're doing, but if you have to speed them up or do something a little bit harder and they start moving around, you're just gonna be coaching over top of bad movement.
Well, if you can't do the movement in the correct plane, then it's not going to work out well anyway. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of what you're having to do with the kid.
Yeah. And, you know, people are like, well, you know, it's close. I'm like, close isn't it, though. No, you're doing an entirely different movement.
And somebody's paying you.
Yeah.
Let's not be close. Let's be right.
Exactly. Yeah. I've had kids come in, and you were talking about managing expectations. And if nothing else, I'm honest in the beginning. Even if they don't want me to train their kid, I'm not going to be the person that promised something that's not true.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've had a guy come in with an 11-year-old girl. He told me she was on the Olympic track at that point. And money was not an object. She already had a professional soccer coach and this kind of stuff. And I said, well, what if she doesn't get any taller? Because she was little.
Yeah.
Well, her soccer coach said, I understand she probably has really good soccer skills, but what if she doesn't get any taller? Or what if she does get taller and that makes her slow? You know, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And he didn't want to hear that.
Of course not.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden I was too expensive, even though my prices have not changed. You know?
What do you do mobility wise for those guys? Because you know a lot of these kids now, especially, very stiff, spending too much time playing Fortnite or whatever it is that they're playing, and they have no mobility whatsoever.
Well, I generally start from the feet up. Now, here's something I have learned that was really odd, and it changed the game for me when I realized it. So, sometimes ankle mobility is not a calf or an ankle issue. Sometimes it's not a hip issue. Sometimes it's a core strength issue.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I had a lady years ago that I did everything I knew to do to work on her ankle mobility, and she just could not perform a bodyweight squat. And it became something that was really discouraging to her. So I just started doing some different things to watch her move around, and I elevated her heels, and when she had her heels up and squatted, she hitched in the middle and bent and then went back down straight. And at that point in her squat, and what the problem was is she had been heavy before and was used to getting up, down, and putting her hand on a table or something. And she had lost 100 pounds, didn't have to do that anymore, but in that position her core was weak and she bent over at the waist, and it had tightened her ankle mobility from there. So I started doing core strength exercises, and in a month she was squatting all the way down without bending over the waist.
What I've seen over the last few years is most of the kids that show up in the 9th grade have the worst hip flexibility you can imagine.
Oh yeah.
And so you have to almost deconstruct them to get them to do things correctly.
Yeah, you got to start over with them.
And it's frustrating because that's pretty preventable.
Yeah.
You know, if nothing else, make your kids sit down in front of the TV and do some stretching, and you know, if you can develop and work to where you're doing a plank, great. You know, have them do it during commercial breaks and stuff like that. Make it fun, make it enjoyable. Don't let it be miserable.
Well, it really doesn't have to be, you know, if you're not sure what to do, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Have them stand up, touch your toe, just do something.
Yeah, and that's, we're running into, and I can't speak to prior generations because, well, I am the prior generation, so I really don't know. But the group of kids that we're working with these days, a start from scratch type thing. Like, I mean, it's really, really starting over. Or you get the young man or young lady who has been coached by someone prior, and you're still having to start over because they had no clue what they were doing and they've created some really bad habits.
And just started doing stuff they saw on YouTube.
Yeah. Google is not always your friend. You know, I mean, you can learn a lot. You could sit there and YouTube a lot of things we're talking about and get an idea of it, and you'd be much better off than some of those people who take their online training course and now call themselves a trainer.
Well, the issue with some of those people is if they wanted to study, they don't even know the right people to study.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned before, with people being so sedentary, what I think is the easiest thing to compare this generation with and how you have to approach a lot of these kids is how you would have approached senior citizens 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, because, I mean, they're spending too much time, and you're talking about people who probably spent their lives working at a desk job. That's almost what these kids are like now, because they spend their lives on a laptop or iPad or cell phone playing a video game, and they're just in a seated position for so long that it just binds all those things up.
You know, if you think about it, there are a lot of people that you think about their day that never get in a completely standing erect position. Yeah. So you think that you sleep on your side, you kind of curled up. You get up in the morning, you go sit down on the toilet, and then you stand up and you go sit down in the chair and you eat. You sit down in the car, you drive to school, you sit down in a chair, you move to another class, sit down in a chair, you drive home, the same thing until you go to bed again, slumped over.
You know, and it's a matter of getting them up, getting them moving, getting them a fair assessment, and then going from there.
Right. That's really what it comes down to.
How much jumping do you do with them?
I do as much as I can as early as I can. And that comes, there are a couple things I look at before I have them jump. And that's can they squat without their knees coming in? Because whatever their squat looks like, you can multiply that by 10, whatever faults you see when you're jumping.
Yep.
As you well know, you put a load on their shoulders or chest with a bar, then that's going to show up that way as well. So I want to make sure that those issues are fixed, that their feet don't turn out a lot, that they're able to keep their thoracic spine stabilized. And once that's done safely, then I'll start off with what I call shallow plyometrics. And then from there, try to get to deep knee plyos.
So you're not jumping off of 6-foot boxes and things of that nature with those guys?
That's way down the road.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I end up doing a lot of just single leg hops, hopping left, kind of hopscotches type stuff. People think it looks a little silly, but the reality of it is you got to be able to move those feet independently. You got to be able to use each leg independently, and you got to be able to get a little bit of spring in everything you do.
You're going to look a lot more silly if you're slow in a game than you will hopping on one foot.
No doubt. I was speaking with a college coach earlier this week, and he was, all smiles and giddy about how explosive one of our athletes was. He was like, he looks effortless jumping. Mm-hmm. Yes, because we spend a lot of time working on those things.
Yeah.
And that's part of it. You have the goal in mind. That's why that conversation at the beginning is very important with the parent is, okay, a year from now, I would like this child to be able to do these things. Mm-hmm. And if they're like winning gold medals, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, I want to be able to see this child run in a particular pattern. I want to see them be able to jump, X number of feet in a broad jump and things of that nature. Until you can get those things down, you're not going to benefit from the training. You've got to be able to do those things to be able to do sport-specific type stuff.
Yeah. Not everybody is a specialist.
Correct.
Not everybody is advanced. Most people are not advanced.
And so that brings me to kind of point I was trying to get to here is that if you're training a youth, you need to be training the youth for athleticism and developing strength. Not, I'm trying to make him the best baseball player he can be. We're not there yet. Mm-hmm. We're just not there yet. I know that's not what a lot of people want to hear, but you don't need to be sport-specific training a kid at 10 years old if they can't do a push-up, a plank, a squat. You just got a lot of things that need to get done before you get there.
Yeah, I've had trainers that have worked for me in the past, and I had to try to get that across to them. It can be a temptation sometimes, I guess, if you have experience in a particular sport to do that with the kid. Mm-hmm. But that's not what they come to me for. They don't come to me for soccer practice or football practice or lacrosse practice. They come to me to get stronger and faster to play those sports.
Correct.
They practice all the time. That's why they're coming to me. Yep. So that's one thing that you have to keep in mind is it's not so much the skill development, it's the preparation to get better at those skills.
And you're putting the cart before the horse anyway.
Right. And, if I had my druthers, which I never get anybody to do this, I don't even bring it up, but they would quit practicing for 2 weeks while they train with me.
Yeah. I get it. I do understand it. That's why it's good to start with the youth level. It's good to start developing those kids. And it's obvious when the kids walk in the door at the high school level, for me, if they've had experience with someone coaching them up. Not necessarily always in the right way, but they got a parent who's into fitness and has them work out with them. Things that those kids are always a step ahead of the people who allow their kids to do nothing but play video games until the season starts.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything special. You just have to be active. Essentially, what we're doing is making up for inactivity.
Yeah, that's a great way to phrase that. And I know, hopefully a lot of parents don't listen to that and think, oh, well, I just, need to do this. There's more to it than that. But at a bare minimum, if you're getting your kid up and doing things with them, it's a benefit. Just running around in the yard, playing with them, throwing water balloons with them, things of that nature. Yeah. Right? It's still going to help them develop their body awareness, which is a huge part of this.
We are making up for not playing anymore. It's just what it is now. We have to make up for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to sit in the house and play video games. I tell parents this all the time. I'm competing with the air conditioner and that PlayStation 5.
And the fact that you ever beat that is a big deal these days.
So,
A PlayStation 5, I was looking, I can't believe how much those cost.
oh yeah, and you can't get them. Like, they're hard to find and everything.
I saw that, and I'm like, well, there's no danger of me getting caught up with the PlayStation 5.
Me either. I can't afford one.
Yeah.
Unless you guys got a lot of youth you want to get trained, and you can give me a call, and I might be able to afford a PlayStation 5.
Yeah, we'll train them in a group if you just bring a PlayStation with you.
Seems like a fair trade.
Yeah. This is a unique opportunity in an athlete's life as they transition to becoming a high school athlete. Because if you can get them prepared to go into high school athletics and hit the ground running, and they have a good strength and conditioning program available at that point, that depends on the school. That is the only time, and if they continue on to compete in college, that they have 4 years for someone to do what they need to with them.
Yeah.
It's the only time you can guarantee you've got a kid for 4 years.
Yeah.
And they can implement and build a great foundation. And then if they have the ability and the desire to play a sport at the college level, then the strength coach there should take advantage of that opportunity.
Oh yeah. You got a locked in, fixed in, not going anywhere client base.
Yeah.
You can really develop some things, and that really becomes fun. That's really enjoyable.
Yeah.
Watching that person develop from a younger age until they leave from you or your school or whatever. I mean, it's amazing. It's fun to see the change. We had a young man in here earlier today who's rehabbing a leg injury, but he was training some upper body stuff, and he just looks like a different human from 6 months ago. It's just amazing how fast these kids change, and you should be seeing results. I know a lot of other trainers might be like, well, don't promise these things. I'm not promising you anything, but you should be able to see results. You should be able to see that athlete in a few weeks being able to move better, to be able to bend better, to be able to not fold over like a piece of lawn furniture.
Yeah.
And if you're not seeing those things, you need to reevaluate why and how you're training that athlete.
That's it. And you don't always get the perfect plan right away.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to go, okay, well, let's back off of that because they didn't react the way I would. Now, that's just a part of coaching. If you have a trainer that's not willing to do that.
Yeah, when I take on most clients, I tell them I need 5 months. I need 20 weeks. Mm-hmm. Because the first few weeks is really just me evaluating, trying to fix or figure out a decent path. By that time of 5 months is up, you should be developed some. You should be able to see good results. But nobody's a miracle worker.
Right.
And that's the reality of it. I'm really that way with my strength training clients. I need at least 10 weeks of fundamentally fixing the things that you're doing wrong before I ever try to make you stronger.
Right. Because there's a level of skill development no matter what you're doing. Here again, with a trainer or coach, whatever you want to call them, if all they're doing is what you do, what machines do, why are they there?
Yeah.
There has to be another level. If that is their level of expertise, is to tell you what sets and reps to do, just go online.
Yeah.
Because I had a guy that I trained, wanted to get better at his deadlift a few years ago. And so I watched him the first day, see if he could deadlift. And then we went on about our business after that. And about a few weeks in, he goes, when are we going to deadlift? I said, we're not. Till the end. Why not? I said, because you already know how to deadlift. You want me to just watch you deadlift?
Yeah.
I said, if you need company, that's fine. We're working on the things that are making you bad at deadlift. Now, we did deadlift movements.
Of course.
But we just didn't go heavy for 5, 3, 1 or whatever.
Yeah. It's a funny part of a lot of people don't understand is, and the deadlift actually particularly, you don't have to deadlift a whole lot, as in often,
right,
to get better at it.
Yeah.
And again, just like playing football or baseball or any of those things, you don't have to do it a ton to improve at it. There's ways to improve at it in a weight room.
Right. And, more is not better. Better is better. There was he was a strength coach at Central Michigan at the time for football. And he may not even be there anymore, but they had some success. I think it was when, what's the guy's name that played at Tampa, just acting crazy? Antonio Brown?
Yeah.
He was there, I think. And he really, that strength coach really took advantage of his opportunity there. He said that freshmen were not allowed to do any Olympic lifting their first year.
Yeah.
That was only for upperclassmen.
I understand that, though.
Yeah, but there's a lot of skill involved in that.
Yeah, I don't have, we don't really power clean until they're juniors and seniors.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel their strength and overall body composition equate at the 9th and 10th grade level. Of course, there's exceptions to those things, but it's just the risk-reward ratio here. The risk is too high for the reward that I'm going to get. Now, we'll clean, we'll do kettlebell swings, things of that nature, until we're good enough to do it correctly.
One thing that really you have to take into account with your programming is, has a kid developed into puberty yet?
Yeah.
And here are a couple reasons why. There are real physiological difference, maybe beyond what you might think. For one, people ask, is it bad to lift weights with a kid? I said, not necessarily bad. You know, before they hit puberty, it's just not going to do you any good. Not like it. You can learn the lifts if you want to.
Yep.
But what you're going to get is coordination. You're never going to get hypertrophy or muscle growth until they hit puberty and start developing androgen. And then another thing is, kids before they hit puberty do not have the same cooling system that they will beyond that. So, for instance, like if we're outside and we have to give the guys breaks during August pretty frequently because it's hot. A kid before, that is 6th, 7th grade, that's still a kid, has to rest more frequently than that because their body can't regulate their temperature like an older kid can. Mm-hmm. So that's because all the kid wants to do is drink water because he needs water.
Yeah.
And it's not a matter of trying to toughen a young kid up. I mean, there's a little bit, but not with water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why we have the restrictions we have today, because people are not smart enough and they run kids ragged and end up killing one of them or hurting them. And I mean, it happens every year.
And so now they have to hold everybody's hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But rather do that than some kid get hurt with that one guy. What are they physically capable of, and what boundaries make sense to push them to at that age? Is it worth it to push an 11-year-old to learn how to do bench press? I don't know.
Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, with the bar and to get good technique once he starts to lift.
Well,
maybe.
And again, there's exceptions. It depends.
Exactly.
But in reality is they've got to do a lot of things right before they need to get to the bench press.
And are they even going to get that down by the time they get old enough to go to high school? That's really what it depends on, I guess, right? Now, Olympic lifting, on the other hand, is something that you do start early.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that it requires a level of coaching that majority of the world will never obtain. Just having a level 1 certification in weightlifting,
I got it. Yeah.
does not necessarily make you an expert in teaching Olympic lifts.
Not remotely.
So that's a whole can of worms that could be a whole podcast in itself.
Yeah.
They're complicated movements. They really are. And that's why CrossFit is so dangerous, but it's, again, another topic we can dive into at some point. Yeah. That would make a good podcast.
That would. Whenever you're ready.
But so to get kind of back on track, when you're training youth, you need to take in the common sense things. What is our goal? What is their level of fitness and ability at this time? How can I improve those things? And you really shouldn't be using a barbell until you can reach certain parameters.
Yeah. And the it depends part is, have they physically mastered other things, the criteria that you've put before that? And 2, what sport? Because Olympic lifting is a sport. And that's why you start early.
Yeah.
You don't start with a barbell, though. You start with PVC or something like that. You learn the technique at 8 years old is what they recommend.
Yeah. And so, and I'll give you this piece of information for you to take in if you're a parent or something listening to this. If your trainer or coach or whatever doesn't have some method of evaluating your child or athlete before they jump into a program, that should be every red flag you need to know to find someone else.
Right. And everything we have covered is what we work on to begin with, because methods beyond that aren't important. Because you have to cover, first of all, have to know what you're dealing with. What's the kid want to accomplish? What can they do now? What's realistic? And then you have to see, can they control themselves? Can they stop movement? Because if you look at plyometric stuff, that comes down to moving one way, stopping, and then moving the other way as quickly as you can. Have some realistic expectations, and beforehand, ask your coach if he knows what he's talking about. Ask specific questions. And we're going to use the ladders. Can he tell you, he'll tell you yes and why, or why he is not, and then you make a decision.
Yeah, and if it's to make them faster, that might be a red flag for you.
Right. Yeah. Continue asking questions until they say either I don't know or that's all there is to know.
Yeah.
One of the two.
I often ask clients, do you want to know what time it is or how the clock works?
Right.
Because that's going to determine how I answer this question.
That's a good way of putting it, yeah. Well, anything that you want to add to it?
Encourage your kids to be up and active, and you can avoid a lot of these headaches.
Do that, and you won't need a coach for things that we used to do all the time.
Yeah.
If you just make them do that, then they can really focus on not just getting ready to train, but getting better while they train.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's it for this one, I guess. Next week we'll have something else.
Yeah, we've got some ideas in store. We'll see. We think we have several ideas for podcasts coming down the line, so maybe we can crank out a few next week.
And, if you've got some ideas too, put something on Facebook or email us, info@fieldhousestrength.com.
Like, share, comment,
Yeah.
post it all over your social media. Share it 10 times. It's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. And if you like it, you want us to keep doing it, then people hearing it would be a good thing.
And if you have a youth you want to get trained, give us a call.
So true. And I'll have it on here after the podcast, but we've got consultations available as well. But now's the time to go ahead and get your kids started for sure.
No doubt.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time. Hey, if you've got an issue that's keeping you from reaching your potential, go to our website, www.fieldhousestrength.com. Schedule a consultation. Maybe I can help. If you have a nagging injury or movement problem, we'll do a virtual Zoom assessment. Based on what I see, I'll let you know how I can help. Free of charge, no obligation.